I seem to be going through a bit of a phase at the moment. And it's a phase of only really sort of like testing performance EVs. I mean, there's been a fair glut of them over the last few weeks. We've had the Abarth 500e, we've had the MG4 X-Power, we've had the Tesla Model S Plaid, we've had the Mercedes-Benz EQS AMG 53. Oh, and I've still to test the Audi e-tron GT RS as well. Now, you think of those brands that I've just mentioned, and they've all got some kind of performance heritage attached to them, if you think about it. Abarth, MG, AMG, Audi, even Tesla, you know, because it kind of became synonymous with the kind of YouTube traffic light Grand Prix. So yeah, they've all had this sort of performance heritage attached to them. But there is another one that I've been driving lately. And it's not what you would call a brand that normally has sporting pretensions up until now. Because that brand is Kia. Now, Kia is a brand that has a lot of brand values. You know, they've always been makers of very good, very reliable, good value for money cars. Think of your granny's Picanto and you kind of get what I'm talking about. But this isn't a normal Kia. You see, this is the EV6, and when the EV6 came out, it started to change people's perception about what Kia really stood for. All of a sudden it became a brand that you put taglines such as design, technology attached to it. But even this isn't a normal EV6. You see, this is a Kia EV6 GT, and it has 577 brake horsepower. So maybe now we can add performance to another one of those brand values. Welcome to this week's road test review. Welcome to the new Kia EV6 GT. And as always, welcome to AutoEV. Now, before we get started with this week's road test review of the new Kia EV6 GT, it is of course that time when I'm going to ask you to make sure you are subscribed to the AutoEV channel. Then once you've done that, make sure you press the little bell button that's down below, because that's the way you'll be notified when our next video is uploaded and goes live. Once you've watched it, if you do enjoy the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. And of course, don't forget, leave us your comments down below. Let us know what your thoughts are on the cars that we review, such as the EV6 GT, and of course on the AutoEV channel as a whole. Now, in fairness, the EV6 doesn't really need a lot of introduction if you've been watching AutoEV for a while, or indeed if you're interested in electric cars, because since its launch back in 2021, it's been one of our favourites, and we've road tested it when it was launched back then, and we also put it up against the Jaguar I-Pace, because it was a sort of, we did it on a new versus used, you know, what are you better off with, a new Kia or a used Jaguar in there. But this is the GT model. Now, it is a hugely powerful car, and as I say, we are seeing a lot of performance EVs coming onto the market. However, just sticking a bigger motor onto a car and turning the wick up to 11 doesn't necessarily make it the pick of the range. You see, we've already seen that with cars such as the BMW i4 M50, because we think the i4 eDrive 40 is the better car to drive. The MG4 X-Power I tested a few weeks back, it's the same. Great car, but not quite as good as the standard MG4. So don't necessarily think that a near 600 horsepower EV6 could be the best pick of that range. But before we get started, let's take a quick reminder about the Kia EV6. Well, it's the brand's first all-electric model to be based on the Hyundai Group's eGMP platform that also underpins the Hyundai Ioniq 5, Ioniq 6, as well as the Genesis GV60. It's fitted with two motors, a 215 brake horsepower front motor and a rear one delivering 362 brake horsepower to give a combined total output of 577 brake horsepower and 740 newton meters of torque, making it over 80% more powerful than the next most powerful EV6. It's fitted with a 77.4 kilowatt-hour battery capable of delivering a WLTP driving range of up to 263 miles. And it costs from just over £62,500 here in the UK. So there's no denying it's going to be fast for a Kia, but it's also expensive for a Kia. But then does that badge really matter when you've got Porsche baiting performance coupled with good driving dynamics, plus all the usual attributes we expect from Kia, such as reliability, comfort, practicality? Well, of course, the only way we're going to find out is by putting it through the actual road test that car buyers trust when it comes to choosing their next EV, and that is the AutoEV one. All right, let's start with styling as usual. Great looking car, the EV6. Always thought that. I think it's one of the best looking cars in its class. And at first glance, you might think there's absolutely no difference to the GT model. But there are. They're subtle, but there are differences. Now, the biggest difference is down here. You've got a new, more aggressive sort of front end to the car. You still got the cooling, we're down at the bottom here, but this jutting kind of chin spoiler is slightly more aggressive than you get on the other cars. This little panel in here is also slightly different as well. It's got more kind of vertical kind of hatchings rather than the kind of horizontal ones you get in the standard car. However, from the front, unless you were a real kind of car nerd, you're not going to really tell that this is the GT. But as I say, that's not really a bad thing, because I think the EV6 is a brilliant looking car. You still got those lovely LED headlights with a kind of slashed sort of like DRLs in them. Of course, digital tiger nose that we've come to expect from Kia, and I absolutely love it in this premium metallic white finish that they've got it in. So yeah, good looking car, but it is very, very subtle about letting you know about its performance potential. So inside profile, you start to see a few more of those kind of clues that this is something a bit more than just a standard EV6. First off, you've got these unique 21-inch alloy wheels with this kind of diamond turned kind of facing here, and of course these acid green kind of brake caliper coloured here. Now these are gripping much bigger brakes. Now they're 380mm discs at the front, and that's up from the 345mm discs that you get on the standard car, and at the rear it's 360mm discs, and they're ventilated like the fronts rather than solid discs like you get on the standard non-GT EV6s. The whole car as well sits at 5mm lower. Now I'll talk about suspension when we're out doing the driving, because it is quite important to discuss what they've tweaked in the chassis with the GT. But again, like the front, it is as we've come to expect from the EV6. You've got this lovely kind of visor graphic that wraps around here with almost like a kind of floating roofline. These flush door handles that pop out when you need to use them, and of course these aero mirrors that are done in the gloss black finish just to match off this little bit here that rises up as it goes into the rear, into these rear tail lights. And I love this floating roof spoiler that you get here, but as I say, it's a great looking car, the EV6, and I think it even looks better as a GT. And the same goes for the rear. You think, oh, they haven't really bothered doing anything, but they have. It's all very subtle. There is a slightly reprofiled and slightly larger rear spoiler to allow that airflow to come down, because of course you don't have the rear wiper. So the design is tried to take all the sort of like the moisture that you'll have in the rear screen off. Okay, anyway, that's changed. The other change is down at the bottom here. You'll see this has got a slightly different reprofiled kind of diffuser area down here. So you've got vertical rather than horizontal reflectors. And again, there's this strange kind of fluting of this light that's down at the bottom there in the diffuser. But then otherwise, it's standard kind of EV6 bar for the little GT badge there. And again, it's subtle because it's like the GT line badge. So again, unless you really know what you're looking for, you're not going to know the performance potential of this car. It's a real Q car. Of course, you've got the standard EV6 design that we love, this beautiful kind of wrap-around sort of like light graphic that goes right, stretches right across the car, your integrated charging flap at the back, the nice bold Kia badge there, and then of course reversing camera just tucked up in there. So, subtle, but as I say, not many changes were really needed because the car was such a good looking car in the first place. But then of course that's our opinion, my opinion. I think this is a great looking car. In fact, I think it's the best looking car in its class. But what do you think? Do you agree? Do you think Kia maybe should have done a little bit more with the GT, made it a bit more aggressive looking? As always, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Now, carrying capacity in terms of rear accommodation has changed slightly. It's 480 litres, which is 10 down on the standard car because you now have to accommodate a bigger rear motor. But as you can see, you can still get the 4 AutoEV suitcases in, plus my camera bag. Obviously you can still use the roller blind as well, so that's all right. What I will say, however, is I've always found the EV6's boot, whilst it's got the capacity, it feels quite shallow in some respects as well. It's not quite as deep as some of the other cars in its class. But as I say, it's pretty much what we've come to expect from the EV6, and it's good for class. There are better, there are a lot worse, trust me on that. But yeah, as I say, 10 litres shy of where it is normally at 480 litres. Plus, remember, you do have a small amount of space up at the front as well. But when I do say a small amount, I really do mean a small amount. It's 20 litres, because obviously there's a motor up at the front as well. Still, that'd be enough for a couple of Mars bars, or, you know, pack of sandwiches. Now the rear accommodation, that hasn't changed at all. So it's exactly as we've been used to with all the other Kia EV6s that we featured on the channel, which is to say there is bags of space back here. It really is a very commodious car in the back. All I will say is if you're slightly taller than me, which let's be honest is not hard because I'm only 5'7", 5'8", you might find headroom started to encroach a little bit. However, there's plenty of lounging space. I mean, that's my driving position. So I've got bags of sort of like knee room. Again, I find it tight for foot room, but I always say this, it's my driving position. I really like to be lower down in the car. So if you've got a driver who has the seat raised slightly, you probably won't find it too bad. Now, we'll talk about the interior in a second, but you've got this nice kind of Alcantara-like material in the centre of the seat. So that's the only real sort of like change back here in terms of sort of like the seat itself. So you've still be able to get three across because you've obviously got the flat floor across there. Storage wise, well, that's all right. You've got the flip down armrest, and obviously you've got either a cubby box or two cup holders, depending obviously on what you want. There is a small load through facility as well into the boot, so if you're carrying a longer item, although it wouldn't have to be a big plank, it would, but you certainly can get it through there. Obviously, I forgot to mention in the boot, but there's a 60-40 split rear seat as well as that little load through, so you can extend the space. Two USB-C connectors in the back there, and on this particular model we've got heated rear seats. Isofix points, yes, obviously as you'd expect to find them, but they're not as well exposed as some of the cars I've been testing recently, and as I say, you've got to jab the prongs between the backrest and the squab to find the actual anchor points. So that's maybe a little bit of a dark point. Now you can't get, I'm led to believe, a sunroof in the GT model for some reason. But as I say, obviously that will maybe increase the filling space. But it does feel quite dark in here because it is a very dark interior that you get in the car. But in terms of space, as we've expected and as we've seen and witnessed with the EV6 we've had on the channel before, it's pretty decent back here at all. You shouldn't find any complaints whatsoever. Now, not much change in here either. As you can see, it's pretty much like the outside standard EV6, except for bucket seats. Now they are very good, they're hugely supportive. They're manually adjustable, however. There's no electric adjustment on them at all. They are height adjustable, but there's no tilt on them. However, on saying that, they are kind of tilted up at the front, so they've got a little bit of under thigh support. I found them okay, in fairness. I know some people have more kind of haven't found them to be quite as comfortable. Now, confession time, my wife's been driving this car all week. She loves it. She absolutely loves it. However, what she did say to me was, because they're not electric, she still couldn't find her exact kind of driving position. She said it's a lot easier with an electric seat just to give it a little tweak every now and again and then store it somewhere so you've got it. She said that was the only thing she found with them being manual. It just, she couldn't quite get it exactly where she wanted it. So just be aware of that. Otherwise, it's pretty much standard fare EV6 that we've come to know and love. The seats, like I said, in the front, they've got that kind of Alcantara centre with the kind of acid green stitch around it. You've also got the acid green stitch around the steering wheel. Still the same steering wheel that you get on a standard EV6, but with the addition of that stitching and that GT badge, which we'll talk about when we're out driving it. Now, I've got the air conditioning running, folks, and I apologise for that if the microphone's picking up. However, you're watching this a lot later than when I filmed it. The day I filmed it, the radio's just said that the UK is hotter than the Canary Islands. It's 32 degrees currently outside. So yeah, I've got the aircon on, so apologies for that. I'm talking to the aircon, that's one thing to kind of feature on. I still like this little panel here. If you have a look, what happens is you've got this panel that does, it's a dual functionality. So at the moment we've got the heating and ventilation controls on, but if you touch it, it then becomes your media controls. And the rotary ones at the side, when they were temperature before, they now become tuning and volume for the radio or for your media. I love this. I think that's a really, really good setup. A lot of people I've seen in the press have said, oh, it's not quite so easy to use on the move. I don't know. I think it's been fine. It would be nice if they were kind of capacitive you know, the sort of the button. So in other words, you press it, you get a little bit of a vibration or feedback to know you've pressed it. But they do actually, in fairness, when you touch them, they do actually beep. So that's one thing for sure. But I like that dual functionality. The fact it has them physical controls rather than using the screen all the time, I think has to be applauded, and I think that's a really neat solution. So I do like that. The screens, okay, right, so it's the standard fare, the usual. I think the 12.3-inch screens, you get dual ones, one in front of the driver, and then it feels like it's one continuous flow across, another one for your infotainment, your navigation, and so forth. I still think this should be more configurable, because my driving position, where I've got it, if I sit like that, the speed on the left-hand side is just being cut off by the rim of the steering wheel. That's the only thing I've found. And it would be nice if you could change it. And I feel like this centre part with the sort of like the little kind of lane keep assist diagram, that should be the ancillary thing that goes to the side, and we should have more focus on the sort of like the speed there. So that I've always said that it hasn't changed, it's no different. So it's my one big criticism of this setup, in fairness. You can change that centre screen obviously to display different things. So trip meter, navigation, power flow, or as I say, you've got the so you know your lane keep assist type of diagram that's in the centre there. So that's what you've got on that section there. State of charge on the right hand side, so your range to go is over on the right, and then as I say, you've got speed sign recognition, traffic sign recognition on the top, and then just your state of charge down at the bottom left there. So yeah, it's good, it's fine, absolutely fine, but I'd like it to be a bit more configurable just to make it easy to read speed at a glance. The steering wheel, as I say, familiar two-spoke design. You've got your usual functionality on it. So you've got your media controls over on the right-hand side, and then your trip computer and driving assistant buttons on the left. So for your distance guided cruise control, your lane keep assist, and your actual cruise control itself, that is there. The right-hand side, as I say, is media buttons. You've also got telephone. You can assign something to your favourites, and then as I say, you've got this big green GT button as such there. Centre console area here, absolutely fantastic design. I like it. This big floating console, obviously, as you know, my usual flask of coffee, water bottle, fits perfectly. Transmission selected in the centre, parking cameras, auto hold, and your parking sensors there, and obviously your on and off button there. You've also got your heated seat and heated steering wheel buttons just at the leading edge of that. Apple CarPlay and Android Auto are standard, but it's wired. They haven't gone wireless yet. Like to maybe have seen them do that. That can't have been difficult for them to do. But the USB ports are down in the front kind of bulkhead. Now you've got this kind of open cockpit feel there with a big spacious bin down at the bottom for storing stuff in. You've also got your wireless charging pad there for your mobile, and a big deep centre cubby there, and obviously your usual kind of door bins for water bottles or sunglasses like I have. So as I say, it's standard EV6 stuff, bar the seats and the addition of that extra stitching. I'll talk briefly about the infotainment system, because I think it is good. It's a little bit of a stretch away because there's no other way of controlling it like from back here. You've got to go into, actually you've got to lean forward and touch the screen, but same as we've come to expect from Kia, Hyundai, and of course Genesis as well. Although they've got different layouts, everything that you expect to find is there. So your EV kind of stats are there. Go back, and then you've got obviously your map, which is, you know, it's fairly quick to respond. It's all right. Navigation, phone, and then obviously, as I say, once you've plugged it in, this would come up with your Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So yeah, it's a good system. I do like it. I've used it a lot. I think it's one of the better ones out there. You know, I think they've done very, very well with it. The only real thing I'd like to say is, I'd like to have seen kind of wireless Apple CarPlay now, because most people tend to be moving that way. What is good with the GT is everything's standard on it. The only option you can have on the car is your paint finish. So everything comes as standard, as you've probably come to expect from like the Kia, Hyundai stuff. Materials used, yeah, good. Again, I love the design of it. I like this kind of soft, this kind of rubberized kind of section at the top of the dashboard there. Slightly too much piano black for my liking. As I say, it always gets a bit dusty and full of fingerprints, but you know, manufacturers seem to like kind of using it. Yeah, okay, there's some slightly harder plastics further down the doors and stuff, but you know, not enough to kind of put you off the rest. But you know, as you come to expect from Kia, it's all well built. You know, there's nothing that feels loose or rattly or squeaks or anything like that in the car, so I can't complain that way. As I say, the driving position I think is good. It's just, as I say, you have got a height adjustment on the seat. It's a manual height adjustment, and as I say, I like it quite low, but even with it in the lowest position, as I say, the steering wheel right, it's just, yeah, it just cuts that bit off. However, you do get a heads-up display, that's what I will say. You do get a head-up display as well. And the car has your usual plethora of kind of safety systems on it, as I said before, lane keep assist, distance guided cruise control. It also tells you, for instance, if you're sitting there in a traffic jam, the car in front moves off, it tells you the car in front is moving off and get ready to move. So all good in that sense. So yeah, if you're used to the EV6's interior, you're not going to find if anything's like alien to you here. But the seats, that's the only thing I'll say. Whilst they are good and whilst they are very kind of sporting and supportive, if you are looking at the GT model, I'd maybe go for a slightly longer test drive if you can, not just from the performance point of view, but to actually feel whether or not you can get your comfort just right. Because as I say, it's the one thing that Liz has commented on, just having to move the seat quite a bit and just trying to tweak it a little bit. So of course, if we're both using the car, well, I've got a very different driving position to her, because she's much taller than me. You know, you're not able to store your position into a memory setting, and you're going to constantly move it around. So that's the only thing I will say. I don't know how difficult it would have been to have these electrically adjustable, but they haven't done that. They are heated, but they're not ventilated. So just bear that in mind as well. But otherwise, because I'm waffling, I understand that. It is a very good interior. I do like it. It's very easy to use. It's great to get on with, and there's loads of storage with it. And I still think it's one of the class best. So the EV6 GT gets the standard 77.4 kilowatt hour battery that the standard car does, and that should see a WLTP range of up to 263 miles. Now, in our time with the car, we've been seeing on average 2.9 miles per kilowatt hour. So if you times that by the 77.4, it's about 223, 224 miles range. So a little bit off what Kia suggests, and it is the middle of summer, so you know the temperature shouldn't be affecting it too much, but I have a funny feeling that my other half's heavier right foot might be affecting that. So if you're maybe being a bit more careful with it, then you're maybe looking at 230, maybe 240 miles, obviously a bit less in winter. Not very GT-like, but then again, if you're buying the GT, you're not buying it because you want to maximise the range, I suppose. Now, charging speeds, it will take 350 kilowatts, meaning this is one of the best cars out there for charging if you can manage to find one of those ultra rapid chargers like those big Ionity ones, and you'll be able to go from the benchmark 10 to 80% in 18 minutes. If you're charging it up from your home wall box, and it's a 7 kilowatt wall box you've got, then you're going from flat to full in 11 hours and 45 minutes. The other thing to remember with the EV6 is you do get a heat pump as standard on the GT, and it does come with vehicle to load capability as well. Now, 577 brake horsepower through two motors, one mounted at the front or one mounted at the rear. There's a slightly bigger one at the rear as well to give sort of like, you know, a bit more power. There's a slightly more powerful motor at the rear than there is at the front. Again, it's that rear bias in terms of its power delivery. Now, we love the standard EV6 GT, you know, and even the sort of like the GT Line S all-wheel drive, you know, it's still a fairly chunky performance car. This is 80% more powerful than that car. Not to 60, 3.5 seconds. Now, I thought the MG4 was quick, the X-Power, but gosh, this is even quicker. Okay, it lags behind the Tesla Model S Plaid that I was driving last week, but pretty much everything bar Elon Musk's SpaceX rocket lags behind that car. But is it any more fun? Well, there's different drive modes in the vehicle. There is different settings you can have, and I don't know if you can hear that, but there's also a dynamic drive sound you can have. Let me just stop talking for a second. It's got a sort of burble to it. Sorry, I'm going really close to that white line. Let me just turn the lane keep assist thing off. Can you hear that? It's like a kind of engine burble. Don't like that at all. I'm going to switch that off, actually. Let's just, should I know where I'm going first? Here we go. Vehicle. And this is a little bit of the problem. You see, a lot of things are buried in the settings. There we go. Let's take that off, shall we? There we are. Right. And we're off. Okay, so you've got drive modes on the car. So let's have a look. So your usual suspects, you've got Eco, Normal and Sport. No different to the standard EV6. And of course, as you go through them, you can feel the change in the throttle response and the steering. There's also a change in the brakes, believe it or not, as well. So you get a slightly more feel to the pedal, if you like, in terms of when you are using the different drive modes. And apologies, that's my tripod sliding around in the back. Yeah, so you get different sort of like a different feel to the brake pedal, which is quite nice actually. I quite like that. It's quite good. But then of course you've got this button here, GT mode, and that pretty much unleashes everything, and that allows you to do ridiculous kind of standing starts and whoa, really squeeze the power out of it. There's a further mode, which is the one that I quite like, which if you press it again, you go into my drive mode. And it's a bit like you get you do get these on other cars where you can set it up individually as to how you want it. So for instance, if you want to loosen off the traction control system, you want a more aggressive throttle map, in other words, so it's a much more instantaneous response from the accelerator pedal, but you want the suspension to be in comfort setting, you program it all into my drive mode, and that's where you have it. And that's pretty much how I've set it up. So in other words, I've got the very quick throttle response, I've slackened off the traction control, and but I've kept the suspension in comfort, because the car has got adaptive dampers, not passive dampers, but even so, it is quite stiff. It is quite stiff, I must admit. When it's in the sportier setting, and I don't know if it's just a combination of the bigger wheels, because I don't think it is. I think it's to do with the spring and damper rates that they've tuned into the car. Unless you're on sort of like billiard table smooth roads, the ride is jiggly, I would suggest. It is a little bit, you do notice it, you do feel sort of like everything through sort of like the car, and as I say, it gets a bit jiggly, and it kind of, when it does that, you lose a tiny bit of composure as well. Now I want to talk about the springs and the dampers, because Kia have done a lot with the chassis of the EV6 GT. As I said, it's not just a case of throwing in a bigger motor at the back and turning the wick up to 11. That's not what they've done. They've done a lot of difference to the suspension, and I shall now explain that to you. Now let me briefly interrupt my drive to explain why Kia have done this. At the front, the car is stiffer. It has a McPherson strut style front end, but instead of one lower control arm, it has two. And the reason for that is by softening it and by putting a second control arm in it, it allows the front wheel and tire to stay in contact with the road surface even more. So as you go through a corner or a bend, as the load shifts from side to side, that wheel having more vertical movement will allow it to stay in contact with the road surface much, much better. However, they've stiffened it at the back, because by stiffening it, you're reducing the amount of vertical wheel travel that you have. So through that bend, when that load comes off, the wheel doesn't have the same amount of travel, and therefore at some point will lose contact with the road surface, and that is when you get oversteer, which if you listen to any pub car bore will tell you is what you want in a performance car. Now that's all well and good if you're in the mood for that style of driving. If you're not, it kind of it kind of pitches itself in. What you can feel is, you can, I mean, because today is a really, you know, it's a beautifully dry and hot sunny day, so there is a huge amount of grip. You also get a huge amount of grip from the tyres, which are a Michelin Pilot Sport 4S's, so there's a huge amount of grip from the tyres. But what it does is you can feel it dig in at the back. There is a rear bias, you can feel it. The car also has a unique electronic differential that they've tuned just for the GT model, and again that will shuffle the power around the car depending obviously on what's needed. Now don't get me wrong, this is a very good car. It is a good car. I do like it. I think there is a lot to enjoy about this car, but only kind of when you're in the mood for it in some respects. One thing I will say about it, however, is, and I have noticed, and coming out of a roundabout like that there has really sort of like emphasised it. The Tesla Model S Plaid, when I had it, really struggled to disguise the weight of the car. This doesn't so much. It's a heavy car, you can't get away from that, because obviously it's an EV and you know, they are heavier cars. There's no getting away from that. But it doesn't necessarily feel it. It has got a fluency to it, which is quite nice. But it can be a bit unruly unless you get it set up exactly how you want it. So in other words, if you just play around with it and leave it how it all is, as I say, you do get this kind of jiggly motion where the springs and the dampers aren't quite controlling everything well enough, if that makes sense. And when it gets to that point and you're pushing on and you're going a little bit further and you're just getting a bit of a shuffle on, it almost feels a little bit, not scary, but almost you're not quite in control, it's not quite comfortable enough. A good performance car should be something that flows with you. It should be something that goes along a nice twisty road and really works with you. It shouldn't fight against you. And I get the impression that every now and again, as you up the speed, this starts to fight against you a little bit. Now if you like that, great, crack on, you know. Who am I to suggest anything different? But if you don't, as I say, it's not quite perfect enough. Alright, let's talk about other things as well. So, usual stuff, what you've come to expect from Kia with the EV6. Good driving position. Let me just quantify that as well, because I was talking about the seats earlier when we were doing the interior section. You do have to kind of shuffle them around a little bit to get the exact driving position that you want, which is easy with the sort of like electric seat adjustment, because you can just tweak it every now and again. When you're trying to move it manually backwards and forwards, it's not quite as easy. So you've got to get it really set up how you want it first, and then you're off. And then it's absolutely fine. You've got a good relationship with the pedals and the steering wheel. As I said before, the steering wheel, I think, just cuts off that dashboard a little bit too much for me. That's my only caveat with that. There's relatively good visibility around the car as well. You get excellent big mirrors, good over-the-shoulder visibility as well. You've got that little extra quarter light in the back. Plus, of course, you get Kia's excellent blind spot monitoring system. Tesla now offering this, offering it. They have it as well now. So when you indicate, you get the image from the camera down that side of the car, whatever side you're indicating on, to show you the blind spot. I think that's it's one of the best safety features I think you can get on a modern car, and I really like that. So it's really very good. When you aren't in the mood and you go back to, say, normal mode, what's the suspension like then? Well, it's okay. It's not as compliant as, I say, the normal EV6 is. So again, it's going to depend obviously on what you want the car for. And let's be honest, the GT Line S all-wheel drive, it's got 321 horsepower. It's not a slouch. So in some respects, it has a slightly broader range of talents, I think, that car. And that's what I'm starting to wonder whether or not that would be the one that I would probably choose, given what you would end up maybe using an EV6 for. But I don't want you to get the impression that this is a bad car. It's not. It's a very good car. And what makes it a good car is the fact that it's based on a very good car to begin with. Exactly as I said with the MG4 X-Power, you have a good base on which to build on. I'm just not sure they've gone the right way. There tends to be a lot of manufacturers where they're chasing these sort of like, you know, big accelerations and going, oh, isn't this fast? Isn't it powerful? Yeah, it is. But that's maybe not, as a driving enthusiast, what we want. We want it to be a bit more communicative. We want to be a bit more interaction with us as a driver. And I'll go back to an old favourite of mine, and I'm sorry if it's boring, but it's where I think the Polestar 2 BST 270 really won. It's not any more powerful than the standard car with the performance pack fitted, but what they've done is they've concentrated on what's underneath and what's happening underneath to make it interact with you as a driver a bit more. And I think that is what's needed in these performance EVs. They need to stop chasing silly acceleration times, because once you've done it a couple of times and you've kind of impressed all your friends, that's it's done. When it's you in the car on your own and you want to just go out and enjoy a drive, not to 60 in 3.5 seconds isn't really about enjoying a car, is it? It's just about blasting, embarrassing supercars away from traffic lights. Once you've done that a couple of times, what else is there to do, really? Now, other things, brakes. Brakes are very good. As I say, there's a different feel to the brakes depending on what drive mode you're in. You can also alter the regenerative braking as normal with Kia via the 2 paddles behind the steering wheel. And you have, depending obviously on what you want, you can take it off completely. You can go level 1, level 2, level 3 or max, where it's effectively one pedal driving, or you can go into an auto mode where the car will obviously use its sensors and guidance to determine, and I think it also uses the GPS as well, so it knows if you're coming up to a roundabout, for instance, and it'll actually slacken things off. So as I say, I think that is one of the best systems out there, and I absolutely love the way that Kia have got that set up via the paddles, as does, in fairness, Hyundai and Genesis as well, because it obviously uses the same system as well. So I do like the braking system in the car and the regeneration of it. As I say, once you've got the driving position right, it's nice, it's comfortable. These seats, I don't find them too hard, too pinching. I wouldn't want to have any more red wine and cheese if this was my car going forward, but I'd maybe question what I was going to have for dinner that night. But they hold you well. They don't tend to force your head a little bit forward like the standard cars do, with that sort of like silly kind of ET-like head restraint. Although it'd be interesting to see what these are like over a longer distance, because I have heard some people say they feel the side bolsters just a bit uncomfortable. But I suppose that depends on your height and body shape. Otherwise, what you've got is the standard EV6 that we know and we love, and that's a good thing. But with the GT, I just don't know if they've focused on the right things. And I just don't know, once you, as I say, you get away from that ridiculous power output and that, you know, insane acceleration, whether or not I'd be a bit bored after a while and just go, actually, what I really want is just a slightly softer setup. And I get that from a GT Line S all-wheel drive. Now, in terms of price, what are you looking at for the EV6 GT? Well, it's £62,645. Now, you might think to yourself, well, that's expensive for a Kia. But remember, the brand is having a real push-up market. We're going to be seeing the new EV9, the big 6-7-seat SUV soon, and that's going to be this sort of price level as well, because that's the market space that it's competing in. And as I've always said, people tend to be less brand-led now. They're more interested in sort of like efficiency, sustainability messages, and of course reliability, which is one area where the Kia really does win as far as we're concerned. Now, the price of this particular test car is just over £63,000 because it's got the premium white metallic paint fitted to it. The only other option you can have is that matte grey kind of frozen paint, which would take the price up to £64,145. And of course, these prices are correct at the time I'm filming this. And as I say, everything comes as standard on the car, including, of course, Kia's incredible 7-year warranty. So that is a big boon. And of course, with that big charging speed that it's capable of, bear in mind you've got access to Ionity chargers that are, that have that sort of charging capability. So in terms of your time efficiency and how much time it costs you when you're charging, I think that's got to be taken into consideration as well. Now I have a little confession to make here, because this was actually supposed to be a group test with Rod and Charlie as well, and we had some competitors lined up for the EV6 GT, but dates fell apart with cars being available and such like, and this one moved forward and one moved back, and we just couldn't get it, and one wasn't going to be available at all, so we couldn't get it to work. So I'll mention the cars that we were going to have here on test with the EV6 GT, because we feel these are the main competitors for it. So Ford Mustang Mach-E GT, we think that is a real competitor for this car. And the other car we were going to have here is BMW's i4 M50. So we're going to see if that kind of crossovers of the sort of like the Mustang Mach-E and of course the Kia could muscle in that kind of performance saloon territory that the i4 M50 occupies. There are, of course, other competitors as well. So Volvo, for instance, have just revised the C40. It's twin motor C40. It gets this sort of like the running gear now, sort of like from the Polestar 2, so rear biased, a much more kind of sporty drive. And whilst it's down on power on the Kia, the Ford and the BMW, its driving characteristics are very sporty and its performance figures are very, very close as well. Of course, there's the sort of like the enemy within. You've got Genesis, of course, with the GV60 Sport, which uses the same sort of like running gear as this. Genesis have maybe got a slightly more kind of luxury kind of take on the car, if you like, less kind of sporting bent that maybe Kia are after. But of course, we saw at the Goodwood Festival of Speed, Hyundai's offering the new Ioniq 5 N is going to come in. Of course, their N brand is a very much a sort of like a performance badge, and I'm led to believe there's quite a lot of trick stuff on that car. So that is going to be an interesting comparison. But interesting to see what price-wise that comes out at in comparison with this. We did a twin test with it last year, of course, with the Jaguar I-Pace. Now, again, down on power, but in terms of dynamics and performance, it's not far off this. So again, you might find you might be in the marketplace, sort of like, if you're looking at this car, you might be thinking, oh, I could buy a demonstrator, an X-Dem with Jaguar I-Pace as well. So you get the premium badge, one of the best driving EVs out there, for similar money to this car as well. And of course, we can't not mention the Tesla Model Y performance. So in terms of its actual performance delivery, it's very, very close to offering what the EV6 GT does. But again, it's a much more kind of practical car. It's a more kind of family orientated car and less kind of focused in on the actual sort of like performance aspects of its drivetrain and its running gear. Now, in terms of Europe, from Stellantis Group, not from Stellantis Group, from Volkswagen Group, you do have some offerings with a sportier bent to them, such as Volkswagen with ID4, ID5 GTX models, and of course Skoda's Enyaq VRS and Audi Q4 50 e-tron. However, they, in terms of their power and performance, are much more aligned with the sort of like the standard EV6, the GT Line S all-wheel drive. So I wouldn't necessarily class those as competition for the EV6 GT. So here's what we like and what we don't like about the Kia EV6 GT. Well, we like the subtle looks of the GT and of course the EV6's design overall. Its great charging speed capabilities, its good interior, the straight line performance, and of course Kia's excellent warranty package. We don't like? Well, it's not quite as practical as some rivals. There is a loss of range over the standard EV6, even the dual motor one. There's a feeling that's a little bit overpowered for the chassis. And it's not quite the engaging driver's car we had hoped that it might be. So like I said right at the start, there just seems to be a bit of a glut of performance EVs that we seem to have been featuring on AutoEV as late. And of course, EV6 GT adds to that list. It is an exceptionally fast car, there is no doubt about that. And I think it's a real niche product from Kia, and I think it probably is the right product from Kia in terms of the fact that I think it will lift the brand image and it will add on performance to those sort of list of brand attributes that they've always been well known for. However, don't mistake fast for fun, because as we've seen before, especially with the AMG 4X Power, it's a good car, but it's good because it's based on an already good car. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best car that's on offer in that range. And it's kind of the same with this, with the EV6 GT. It is very good, but it's a bit unruly. And the problem with it being unruly is when you're not in the mood for it to be unruly, which usually is going to be about 95% of the time when you're trying to use it as a normal everyday car, I would find it more frustrating than fun. What's the point of all of that power if you don't have the control and the usability to go along with it? So whilst I do like the EV6 GT, I love the standard EV6 GT line S all-wheel drive even more. Thank you for watching yet another episode of AutoEV. As always, please make sure you are subscribed to the channel. And then once you've done that, press the little bell button that's down below, because then that way you'll be notified of when our next video is uploaded and goes live. If you have enjoyed the video, please make sure you give it a thumbs up and let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. Do you think that I'm talking a load of rubbish? Have you driven this car? Do you think it's absolutely incredible? Have you ordered one? Have you placed an order for one? Did you drive both the standard car and the GT back to back? What did you think? Of course, let me know in the comments down below. Now remember, we're across all social media platforms as well. So Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok and LinkedIn as well. So if you could give us a follow there as well, we really would appreciate it, because that helps us too. And if you're just really now in the mood to watch even more electric car reviews from us, then stick on the YouTube channel, because there's well over 150 videos now. And they're not just road test reviews, there's twin tests, used car buying advice, there's van reviews, there's even motorbike reviews on there as well. So stick with us and plough through some of those. All that remains for me to say is thank you once again for watching. Thank you for continuing to support the channel. I'll see you again soon.